Hey YouTube, I had a really strange dream. It's an unusual dream. I've never had a dream like this before, at least not on this scale, not this elaborate, but it made me think about something. In the dream, I'll just call it a product of a bygone era or a forgotten war. I dreamed that the Soviets had a final solution for our country. Remember how in the manifesto they said they would take this country without firing a single shot? Well, it could have been them. Maybe it could have been the Nazis, for all I know. But in the dream, the way this evil power, this bygone power, or even maybe still around power, but quietly around, the way they did it was they sent agents over into this country to pose as companies who would contract laborers over a slow and long process to build these massive tanks and put them in the ground, kind of like fuel storage tanks would be put in the ground. And they put them in key locations, thousands of them. And what these tanks, the way they were made, and this is where it's freaky, because I could see this process in my head, and it's strange that an abstract process such as a dream would come up with this. But the way these tanks were, they were multi-compartmentalized. There were two long, super large tanks and one small tank in the middle. And the two tanks held the two ingredients that when combined would make a lethal gas like mustard gas or nerve gas. And the tank in the middle had an air vent coming out of it that came up above the ground, so any passerby would never know these tanks were there. And they were built so slowly and over such time that people never really paid any mind to them being put in there. But these tanks were in the ground, and they had electric valves that would release the two substances into the middle tank, where they would mix and they would combine and they would form this gas, and it would be in vast quantities, and it would creep along the ground rather than go up in the air. And it seems in my dream it was mustard gas, but news reports in the dream started coming out all over the place. One of them actually had sat in the ground so long, probably 50, 60 years, had sat in the ground so long that the valves or whatever they used to keep the ingredients separated had failed, or the walls of the tanks had rusted and they had begun combining, and people had begun dying around the hill. And in the dream they showed a work crew out there with diggers and cranes, and they had this big tank structure hanging up on these booms and slings where they had pulled it out of the ground. But they weren't like little. These weren't like two propane tanks put together. These were like massive, like house-sized tanks or bigger, that had just been, the ground had been opened up, they'd been set in the ground, and then the ground had been covered over, and it had just been made to look like a hill. But the hills from the air had a specific shape. It looked almost like an H-shaped hill coming out of the ground. Usually it was shrouded with trees and other things to disguise its appearance, but I dreamed this last night. It was scary to think about. Scarier still, in my dream I could see the ingredients for this thing, but now that I'm awake I can't remember them. But they were very basic. It was basic stuff that exists in the everyday world that you would never think, you would never in a million years think could combine to make the lethal compound that these tanks were designed to emit. And that was partly how these people got away with building them, was there were no flags being set off by anybody over the years that they were constructed. You know, even when they bought the materials to make the fuel for this lethal device. But that scared the hell out of me. And I thought I would share that. Has anybody had a similar dream like this where everything went together so perfectly in the dream? You know, it was just too real. And it all made such sense. I mean, that would be the way if you wanted to actually do in another country and you convince them you're their friends, or you convince them that you're gone or you failed, but you leave behind a great big gift spread all over the place that's set to go off on a certain day. You know, I know it sounds conspiracy. I've never had a dream like this before. I've never had a dream like this before, but this is weird. But I thought I would share it. I just woke up like 10 minutes ago, and they were finding these things all over the country, big towns, little towns, you know, just places where this stuff had been built. Anyway, I'm probably running out of time, but I'd like your input on this. You know, it sounds fiendish and very conspiratorial, but hey man, sometimes you dream about some weird stuff. Anyway, I'll let you go. Thinking further on this dream, I know I was gonna sign off, but thinking further on this dream, this could have been theoretically possible to do unnoticed. Remember during the 50s and even up into the 60s, people were having bomb shelters put on their property? You know, these underground shelters made out of huge tanks and pipes and concrete. At that particular time, especially during the Cuban Missile Crisis and things like that, it would have been theoretically possible to put things like that in the ground, because a lot of people were going nuts and putting nuke shelters in the ground made out of everything imaginable, you know. So to see somebody or see a group of people putting something like that in the ground on their property, you know, even civil defense size projects. Does anybody remember the civil defense tunnels? You know, that was theoretically a time that it was possible to get away with something like that. So now I'm starting to wonder if that dream was trying to tell me something out of the blue. But anyway, I have some research to do. That's, yeah, it was definitely a weird dream. And this is definitely the end of the video, so I'll let y'all go.